in your opinion, and you said that you explained a little bit about this two candidate spaces. Now, this election is unprecedented in many ways. So we have for the first time a former president and the
Mhm.
sitting president. Uh, and we had two postulates that would not, one of them would necessarily be broken. Nobody has ever managed in a presidential race to win after being the runner up in the first round, and no sitting president has ever lost. This is the first time that
Mhm.
happened. And God knows Bolsonaro threw everything but the kitchen sink in this election in terms of
Right.
social policies.
Right.
Um, and I'm sorry if this repeats a little bit what you said, but in many ways it's hard to understand how has Bolsonaro lost this election given the how much he spent.
I
And,
mean,
and,
he
and
almost won it.
yeah. But
Right.
that's the thing.
He almost
Other
won it.
presidents,
Um,
should they
yeah.
spend that much, they would get massive
He
landslides.
did spend a lot, but if you look at, fiscal spending in the aggregate, you've seen a lot of areas that were cut. So, salaries for public servants have not increased in years. As a percentage of GDP, public spending has fallen over his mandate. Um, and so, people who support Bolsonaro will tell you something like, well, yeah, he did really push the pedal this year in terms of, increasing all sorts of social benefits, targeting the poor, in an effort to influence the race, but that does not compensate for all the major cuts that actually happened over his mandate. So there is, a case to be made regarding the fact that perhaps the Bolsonaro government was more fiscally responsible than it appears when you just see, the bonanza in terms of spending that happened over this past year, and also when you look at things such as the secret budget that Congress has deployed to benefit the you know politicians in all sorts of constituencies where they're aligned with Bolsonaro and they're campaigning for him across the country. Um, I think Bolsonaro lost the election in a way that's kind of peculiar because looking at economic achievements and looking at how Brazil went through the pandemic, it was not the worst example of responding to a pandemic. You had significant compensation of people who lost income. You had a significant effort to make payments to a very large share of the Brazilian population to get through the pandemic, um, you know, uh, decently. You had a vaccine effort that was not a disaster, actually, but Brazil managed to control the pandemic in many ways faster than many more developed countries. It's just that, I'm saying you all of these things, and people will be like, "What is he talking about?" Because I don't believe any of this, and the voters also didn't believe. It's not, the perception of what was the Bolsonaro government is very different from what the perception could have been based on objective statistics. You know, it's just that he never made really an effort. He never defended the vaccine, even as Brazilians got the vaccine, right?
Hmm.
He made a point of not getting vaccinated himself. That create inflicted political damage. He made an effort of kind of pointing to these social payments that happened this year. The increase of Bolsa Familia, or the new name of the program is Auxilio Brasil, from 400 to 600 reais. Um, every time he kind of referred to this, it was always in the context of the presidential race, in a debate, explaining why people should vote for him. It was not in a sense, the same discourse that Lula would have had. We need to combat social inequality and poverty.
Yeah.
So it appeared to be something that was very, utilitarian, and so that prevented him to capitalize on that. And the story just kind of gets repeated, like the communication of the best aspects of his government was systematically a disaster. And you add on top of that, insults. You add on top of that the fact that he referred. One of the things that I really think impacted this runoff campaign was an episode where he referred to a group of teenage Venezuelan girls, 15, 16 years old, as prostitutes without
Yeah.
having any kind of proof. And he kind of repeated
And
that.
saying that there was a vibe between
Yeah,
him and them.
and it was kind of, it was a lie. He
Yeah.
lied. And that's that. And people could see that he lied. I mean, it's we have lies in politics all the time now. They're called fake news. But in this case, it was attacking the dignity of like innocent kids.
Yeah.
So that didn't fly as well as other events could have. So it's kind of the Bolsonaro strength is derived based on his authenticity, right? He is seen by his supporters someone who's honest, authentic. He say things like they are, and his supporters love that. His supporters love that the fact that he's not like a traditional politician, that he doesn't care about political correctness. So, a very important story to this is that his main challenges and his main weaknesses are also kind of along the same lines of his greatest strengths.
Yeah.
And so it's very hard for him to kind of moderate
Because
to
that's what got him
yeah,
there, right?
yeah. So it's a very tricky balance between these characteristics. He tried, but he didn't always get it right.
Now, Andrei, one thing that I always worried about this election was not only the results themselves, but also the aftermath. Because Jair Bolsonaro has, for years, disparaged the Brazilian electronic voting system and has repeatedly threatened not to comply, not to accept the results if they don't come his way. Now, Atlas released, and I want to ask our producers to bring this piece of data to the screen, because Atlas had this with, for me, was a highly worrisome piece of data, asking voters thought if Brazil was living under a judicial dictatorship. So 58% said no, but 4 in 10 Brazilians said yes. And then when you split by are they anti-Bolsonaro or pro-Bolsonaro, then you have like a massive divide. So anti-Bolsonaro voters, 83% of them say yes. Anti-Bolsonaros, 83% say we are. While 28% of the pro-Bolsonaro voters say yes, we are under a judicial dictatorship.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit, because that's the picture of divide that you were talking about?
Yeah, I mean, for me, the most interesting number in all of this is actually the 16% of the anti-Bolsonaristas also declare this is a judicial dictatorship. And I think that for those voters, it's the smallest segment on this graph, but that's all about the Lava Jato trial stuff that was incurred by Lula. The fact that you have such a large number is actually a result of a pattern of behavior within the judiciary, where you have kind of decisions that get reversed and contradict themselves. With Lula, it appeared that the judiciary could you know um, pretty much fire Lula from Brazilian politics, get him imprisoned, get him out, and get him president. That's kind of a perception that many people will have, regardless of them being Bolsonaristas or not Bolsonaristas. Of course, right now the focus is very much more on the conflict between Bolsonaro and the judiciary. But I think you see a pattern over the past decade where the judiciary kind of has become the arbiter of everything. And within this electoral process, we've seen this reappear with accusations regarding censorship when it comes to social media posts, with this entire scandal that the Bolsonaro camp tried to articulate regarding the radio ads that were systematically not being transmitted in radio stations within the Northeast. In kind of the topics change, but the judiciary is always kind of caught in like the storm of criticism It's always criticized by someone, and right now it's criticized by the Bolsonaro camp. But I think that a lot of the
Yeah,
story
and a
here
few
has
years
to do
ago, we
with,
saw the pro-Lula camp when
yeah,
Lula, and now this is quite interesting. You were talking
hmm
about divide, and we are now
yeah,
seeing
we're
who
seeing
won in each municipality, and we have a striking geographic divide
yeah,
in Brazil.
yeah, yeah.
Is
You can kind of see some urban centers in the south where Lula wins, but with with the exception of that, the interior of the states of Sao Paulo, probably if I was to think of what Atlas got a bit wrong in this, in this last poll, as I'm looking at this map, it's probably this area of Sao Paulo, um, within the interior of the state. We were expecting a closer race in Sao Paulo than we had in the end, and I think that was a major impact on our final numbers. Perhaps the same thing in Rio Grande do Sul. With the exception of those two states, I think we got things pretty accurately, in terms of the overall pattern of the race. But that kind of points to the cultural aspects of this, the fact that you'll see so much more Bolsonaro voters come out and vote for him in remote in rural areas of Sao Paulo, in the context of such negative focus for his campaign. I mean, what didn't happen in this runoff campaign for Bolsonaro for him to lose votes from an ally in Congress that throws grenades at the federal police car and then picks his gun and also shoots at the car and he injures police officers, to another congressman that takes out the gun the day before the election and starts chasing the sympathizer of Bolsonaro's opponent, to his numerous statements in many ways that were divisive and insulting, and were kind of uh, capitalized on by the media that is critical of him. And then you see, this actually in terms of demobilizing his base, it just mobilizes it. So it's a
it's
very,
remarkable
yeah,
if you
it's
think.
remarkable. It's like it's a real cultural clash.
Now, Andrei, I know you have many other commitments now. I know election day for a pollster is the World Cup
It
final.
sure is.
But thank you very much for coming
Thank you
here
so
to our
much,
studios.
Gustavo.
And God knows that finding an Uber in São Paulo today might not be that
Really
easy.
appreciate your
But
invitation, and count on me anytime.
thank you very much. We'll bring an ad that's just very short. Bear with us. We'll be back with more on the results. Now, just for you to just tune in, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva is Brazil's president-elect. We'll be right back.